Okay, good morning, class. We'll start out by asking you the question of the day, which is, who was the leader of the Green Mountain Boys? We learned this in last class. Does anyone know?
Ethan Ham.
The actual answer is Ethan Allen. They were from Vermont. They captured a couple forts up north around the Massachusetts and Vermont and Maine area. And so we're going to go on and learn about battles around the Mid-Atlantic states, Saratoga, and one thing we're going to really touch on is Valley Forge. So first off, at this time, the Colonial Army was kind of losing battles. They were getting pushed back down towards Pennsylvania from up north. General Washington wasn't essentially living up to what people had originally hoped for him. He was struggling. He was losing all his battles. There was a lot of talking saying that they wanted to replace him at the head of the army. So at this point, he needed a big win to kind of take away from that and kind of get his name out there. And he had a big one he crossed the Delaware River, and the night of, I believe, New Year's Eve of 1776, he did that, crossed the Delaware, and won a battle at Trenton, surprised the Hessian soldiers, and was able to take the fort, and that was his first big win as a commander-in-chief. It's really, the way we remember it today is that huge painting of him standing at the head of the boat and all his people behind him as they cross the icy Delaware River. So then he comes into Pennsylvania, southern Pennsylvania, in his Philadelphia campaign. And he loses battles to the British at Brandywine and Germantown, which are right outside Philadelphia, which forces Washington out into more of what we now would call the suburbs of Philadelphia. And he takes up position at Valley Forge for the winter of 1777 and 1778. He decides to take up position here because essentially we're on a hill about 25 miles out of the city. And this is great for him strategically because he's on top of this huge hill overlooking the whole city of Philadelphia. Remember, wasn't too many towns. There wasn't really nothing there between them and Philadelphia. So his view wasn't really obstructed at all, as it would be today. If you're at Valley Forge today, you can still see the city, but not quite like Washington could during that time. So he's sitting up there during the winter of 77 and 78, and it's a brutal winter. His men, the morale goes down. He loses a bunch of his troops due to disease, frostbite, because they kind of lived in little shanties, little wooden shacks that they made. They would fit 8 to 10 men in each shack, and these things are really small, maybe 7 feet by 7 feet, 8 feet by 8 feet. They're still up there today. There was no way that they were able to keep warm. They could all huddle around a fire, but still that wouldn't be enough to get rid of all the frostbite and everything. So essentially, he lost a lot more men than he would have liked to during this time. He ended up Washington himself actually stayed in the house of Isaac Potts, who, being from around this area, is the son of John Potts, who is the founder of Pottstown, which is now a pretty big, vibrant town in this area. So he stayed there during the winter while his men all stayed out in the shanties. While there, his men were trained by Frederick Wilhelm von Steuben, who was one of the major generals under Frederick the Great, who was the King of Prussia, which also lends its name to the town there right now, King of Prussia. He trained Washington's men in all these new tactics that they learned from the Prussian army, which before this, these guys were all commoners, farmers with pitchforks, it seemed like. So to have actual training was big. So now they could actually go up against the British, who were being led by all these great tacticians who they knew all these drills. They had all this ammunition, all these extra guns, and to be trained by another general was really big. So now, when the winter broke in 1778, Washington decided to move his army towards Philadelphia, and he was able to run the British out of the city and take it back, and he crossed back over to Delaware and won another very decisive battle at Monmouth in 1778, and by this time now, Washington had the support he needed to go out and keep winning the war, and he ended up moving his troops south after this. During this time, there were also other battles in Saratoga, and this was another key battle up in New York. It was between General Horatio Gates of the Continental Army and General Burgoyne of the British. The colonists were able to win this battle because of the different styles between the two armies. The British, of course, we know them as the Redcoats. They wore bright red uniforms, easily discernible, and their whole battle strategy was to stand in a line and volley back and forth with the enemy. So they would shoot, reload, and while they were reloading, the other army had their chance to shoot and take out as many British as they want. And then the British would return volley and so on and so forth. General Gates had his own idea, though. He used more guerrilla warfare tactics, which we all know today is becoming really popular in World War II and Vietnam. His idea was his men wore darker clothes, so in the woods you couldn't see them as well as you would the redcoats, because their coats were bright red. And they decided to hide in between the trees and in the shrubs and really out of sight from the rest of the British. And their idea was, let's hide while they're walking and getting in line. We're going to attack them that way. They're not going to be able to see us. We're going to be able to see them perfectly clear, and we'll be able to win the battle. And that's exactly what happened. They hid. General Burgoyne came up. As soon as the Continental Army fired first, Burgoyne had his men go in line. Very easy to pick off. And again, with their attire, their red coats, they made easy targets for the rest of the Continental Army. And Gates was able to win. Burgoyne was actually killed at that battle. So that was a big loss for the British. Burgoyne was one of their top generals at the time. So now what we have is Washington deciding to move south. Burgoyne's moving south through Saratoga down through New York. They kind of meet down near Virginia, which is where the war was escalating at this point. So we have going down south right now. Again, more of the I want to say guerrilla warfare going on down there. You have the Swamp Fox. Okay, so for right now, we're going to go through a little review of what we just learned. The first point I want to make is, it's big, why did Washington choose Valley Forge? And as I said, Valley Forge is on the hill 20 to 25 miles outside the city. From his vantage point, on top of the hill, he could see everything going on in the city. The British were entrenched down in Philadelphia. Any movements that they made, Washington would be able to see. And during this time, during the colonial period, there wasn't too much fighting done in the winter because of the cold weather and all the snow. Wasn't too much fighting going on, so most armies, most troops would actually encamp, find an area and encamp, and stay there for months at a time. December, January, February. Very little fighting because of the weather. A lot of times their uniforms wouldn't allow for that. You know, they're big wool coats, but they don't cover everything. A lot of people get frostbite on their feet and their fingers, and because of all the cold weather. So that's why there was not too much fighting. So Washington decided to entrench there. You'd be able to see if the British decided to come out towards them, leave the city and come towards them, or go back across into New Jersey. He was able to see all that and be able to make his decision that way. And the general who defeated Burgoyne at Saratoga was Horatio Gates, and he used more of a, let's say, guerrilla warfare style to try and defeat the British. It really counteracted what the British had been doing at that point. British, as we know, stand in the line and volley back and forth with their opponents, whereas Gates decided to hide his troops in much darker clothes, much more difficult to see, and was able to defeat Burgoyne and the British that way. And Baron von Steuben was the Prussian military general who decided to train all of Washington's troops during his stay at Valley Forge. And this is key because up to this point, Washington had only trained his troops a very minimal amount. All these people weren't professional soldiers. They were farmers, they were craftsmen. None of them, or very few of them, I should say, had any kind of military background. So to have the main general of the Prussian army train with Washington and his men was really key. It kind of gave them a lot more discipline, more battle strategies that were being used at that time, and helped them in the long run to defeat the British because of these new strategies. And do we have any questions left? All right, thank you.
I got a question.